Okay, think about this for a second. The chair you're on, the screen you're staring at. What if this entire physical world only exists because a mind, your mind, or any mind, is perceiving it? Yeah, I know, it sounds totally nuts. But today, we're going to jump into one of the most famous and frankly mind-bending arguments in all of philosophy that tries to prove exactly that.
And you're not alone in thinking it's nuts. This is what Hylas, who we'll meet in a sec, has to say. He calls it the most extravagant opinion that ever entered into the mind of man. He's our stand-in for common sense, and he's basically saying, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, the idea that there's no such thing as physical matter, that just flips everything we think we know about reality completely on its head.
All right, so let's set the stage for this philosophical duel. In one corner, we've got Hylas. His name literally means matter, and he's fighting for common sense, for the idea we all pretty much live by, that there's a real, physical world out there, whether we're looking at it or not. And in the other corner, we have Philonous, the lover of mind. He's the challenger, and he's here to argue that the world exists only in our minds. So the bell rings and the duel begins. But wait, before they start throwing philosophical punches, they've got to agree on the ground rules. They have to figure out exactly what it is they're even talking about.
And this first rule is so important. They agree to only talk about sensible things, and that means stuff we perceive immediately with our senses. So you don't immediately sense light waves hitting your retina, right? No, you just sense the color red. You don't sense air vibrations, you just sense a sound. Anything else is an inference, something your brain figures out later. This distinction, right here, is the key Philonous is going to use to pick the lock on reality.
Okay, rules are set. Philonous is ready. And he doesn't just come out swinging wildly. No, his approach is much cleverer. He starts to gently pull at the threads of Hylas' common-sense world, one sense at a time. His first jab is a simple question about heat. Think about it. When you feel the heat from a fire, is that heat actually in the fire? Is it some property the fire just has? Or is it just a feeling, a sensation that's happening inside you? And the logic he uses is just brilliant. It's so simple. He says, look, really intense heat, that's just pain, right? And Hylas has to agree, but then Philonous points out that a fire, which is just an unthinking thing, can't feel pain. So where is the pain? It can't be in the fire. The only place it can be is in a mind that's perceiving it. And to really drive this point home, he brings up that classic water experiment. You've probably heard of it. Put one hand in a bucket of hot water, the other in a bucket of cold water. Now stick both of them into a third bucket of lukewarm water. What happens? The hot hand feels the water as cold, and the cold hand feels the same water as warm. So, wait a minute. Is the water both hot and cold at the exact same time? That's impossible, right? It's a total contradiction. The only way out of this paradox is to admit that the hot and cold aren't actually properties of the water. They have to be sensations that exist only in our minds. And once that first domino falls, the rest start to go down fast. Philonous just applies the same logic everywhere. Tastes? That sweetness you love? It's just a kind of pleasure. And pleasure can't exist in a piece of chocolate. It can only exist in a mind. Same with smells. And colors? Well, they change depending on the light, or if you look at something under a microscope. It seems like none of these things are stable, fixed qualities of the objects at all. Now, Hylas is on the ropes, but he's got one last defense. He falls back on a classic philosophical move. He says, okay, fine. Maybe you're right about colors and sounds and tastes. Let's call those secondary qualities. Maybe they are just in our minds. But the real stuff, the primary qualities like shape, size, motion, those have to be in the object itself. They're the real deal. But Philonous saw this coming. He's not even fazed. He's just going to use the exact same type of argument he used before, but this time he's aiming it right at the very foundation of what Hylas thinks is real. He hits him with this. What's the actual size of an insect's foot? I mean, to you, it's just a tiny little point. To the insect, it's a pretty big leg. And to a microscopic animal living on that foot, it's like a huge mountain. So which one is the real size? Just like with heat and cold, it seems like size isn't a fixed thing in the object. It's totally relative to whoever's looking. Then he goes even deeper. He throws down a challenge. He tells Hylas, go on, try to imagine a shape, but a shape with no color, and no texture, and no size. Can you do it? Of course not. It's impossible.
You can't even think about these so-called primary qualities without also thinking about the secondary qualities that Hylas has already admitted are just in the mind. At this point, Hylas is backed into a corner. There's really nowhere left for him to go. So Philonous moves in for the final, devastating knockout blow. And it's a doozy of a thought experiment.
Hylas makes one last desperate lunge. He says, okay, even if all the qualities, color, shape, everything are in our minds, there has to be some stuff out there that they stick to, an unperceivable material substratum that holds it all together.
Philonous just smiles. He sees the flaw right away. He asks, all right, so this substratum, it supports things that have extension, that take up space, right? Well, doesn't that mean the substratum itself has to be extended? How can you support something that takes up space without taking up space yourself?
And this leads to a completely absurd problem. If the substratum takes up space, well, then it needs its own substratum to support it. And that one needs a substratum, and you see where this is going. It's an infinite chain of nonsense. The whole idea just falls apart.
So finally, Philonous offers Hylas what looks like an easy way out. He's like, look, let's forget all the complicated stuff. Just do this one simple thing for me. Picture a tree existing all by itself in a forest, with no mind anywhere near it to perceive it. You can do that, can't you? It's easy. But it's a trap, a brilliant, logical trap. Because the very second you try to imagine that unperceived tree, guess what? You are perceiving it. It's right there in your mind's eye. You literally cannot conceive of an unconceived thing. It's a contradiction in terms. And that is checkmate. Hylas finally sees it. He admits he was so focused on the tree, he was overlooking the fact that I myself conceived it all the while. He tried to prove something existed outside his mind, but to do it, he had to use his mind. He was beaten by his own act of thinking. So, wow. After all that, if the very idea of a material world that exists outside of a mind has been torn apart by logic, what's left? What is actually real?
Well, we land on this absolutely radical and famous conclusion. Esse est percipi. To be is to be perceived. For all the sensible things in the world, the chairs, the trees, the colors, the sounds, their entire existence is that they're being perceived by a mind.
And this leaves us with the biggest question of all, doesn't it? If a thing's reality depends on a mind perceiving it, what happens when nobody's looking? Does your room disappear when you leave it? What keeps the whole show running? This question, it's a big one. It's bounced around in philosophy for centuries, and it even pops up in weird ways in modern physics. It makes you wonder if the very foundation of reality isn't matter after all, but mind. Now that is something to chew on.